these encampments around the country.
Really familiar imagery to me from being a student activist.
And you have a lot to teach people. I want to thank you so much for being with us and for all that you've offered, not just the labor movement, but to your humanity, your in organizing, your brilliance and strategizing. I thank you so much. We're going to do part 2 in a minute. Jane McAlevey, labor organizer for 20 years. That does it for our show. To see that interview, go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of The Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 90.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here. Glad to have you along as well. We've had a very successful pledge drive. I want to thank all of you who contributed, who supported, who became members of KFAI. Your support is absolutely essential, and I want you to know how appreciated it is as well. If you thought about it, wanted to, think you missed the drive, guess what? You can still support the station. Give us a call. Go to kfai.org. Online, it's easy. Make your pledge and still become a member of KFAI family. Thank you so much. Also, we always open the show by thanking those who are supporting The Conversation with Al McFarlane and our streaming strategy. We're streaming live to YouTube, live to Facebook, live to Twitter, and live to LinkedIn. And if you're watching on any of those platforms, we thank you. We want you to be engaged with the program. You can do that by just making a comment, and we'll shout you out. If you want to just say who you are, where you're connecting from, we'd love to know that as well. And as always, become a subscriber. That way you get notification of when we're going live for these programs and others throughout the week. Well, we've got a great program today. And I want to begin by bringing in my colleague and friend, Coach Leah, giving us the lowdown, the latest in the world of sports. Coach Leah, how you doing, my friend?
I am fantastic and super excited to have a very, very dear friend and co-laborer out here in these sports journalism streets. Leah B. Olson is in the house with us, people. Yes. And she is a, homegrown Minneapolis South alum and is currently serving as a sideline or play-by-play. Leah, tell us what you're doing, sis.
Well, I'm doing a little bit of each. For the Wolves, I come in as a sideline reporter, and we'll be with them till the end of this miraculous season that they're having. And then when Lynx season kicks in, I'll be the analyst for the Lynx. So we have some great basketball happening right now in Minnesota. It's fun to be a part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, I would be remiss to not make sure that I get your expert opinion on a couple things. First of all, I wanted to talk with you about our own Minnehaha Academy alum, Jalen Suggs. He would leave the game last night, but then and everybody thought he was done. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I didn't follow that. I had missed that he had said that he was injured in that game. And then people were kind of texting me later on. And Jalen Suggs has had a pretty good year this year playing. And he's obviously was historically great in high school here in Minnesota. And his college career was phenomenal. So I'm hopeful that that was just kind of a weird tweak and he is okay. But I did not see the injury. So I don't know what happened.
What looks as if he went down, he was surrounded by his teammates, went to the locker room, and people thought he was done and ended up finishing the game. So folks, you're going to have to maybe take a look at that yourselves to see what's going on with our homegrown Jalen Suggs. And again, a great career, great season he's having, and we'll see how they do in the postseason with the remainder of these games in this series. So, but we've got to talk about our Timberwolves. I understand that you just left the shoot around before tonight's game. So talk to us about how are you feeling? I so wish that I could just be in that atmosphere right now.
Well, it's been so interesting because the whole storyline for this matchup with the Timberwolves in Phoenix was that we had lost to them throughout every single game in the regular season. And it's the only team this year that got us that way. So everyone was concerned going into this one what this was going to be. And it's amazing what energy can do and what that brings to a playoff run, because the crowd at Target Center was off the chain. It was amazing. And the Timberwolves had these slow starts every time they were playing Phoenix. And so the first time we played them, we were down by like 15. And then the next time we got down and had 8 turnovers in the first quarter. And so we kept having these slow starts. So that was a huge piece of what the Wolves worked on throughout the week. And then they just came out on fire. And it was a great battle, and then just ended up kind of really handling the Suns in that game. They really were able to lock down Booker, who has been outstanding against us. And everyone wanted to see, Kevin Durant is one of the best to ever play in the game. And he was really, really great in this game, but it wasn't enough for Phoenix. And so it was just about kind of everyone stepping up. Our bench was really, really good. And then the star of the show, of course, was Anthony Edwards, who has just been so exciting to watch this young man become kind of the face of the league.
Absolutely. And I really feel like he's owning that as well. Like, okay, if this is my turn, I'm really going to take full advantage of this opportunity. And I love that. I love that for our Timberwolves. I mean, I literally am looking back to day one when we weren't even in Target Center. We were in a little office off of Hennepin and just doing the community engagement work, back in the day when Al Nunes was around as well. And
Sure.
and then to see where we are today, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And your career as well. Listen, girl, we're going to definitely have you back to visit with us. It's so good to see you. I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. Your voice is very much needed, and very much, I'm just so glad that you're there, Leah. And Al, when can we look to see if we can, I'm going to put this out here. When can we get Leah a little more engaged with what we're doing with Inside News and Inside Sports?
Set it up. We'll make it happen.
There we go.
There
we go. Yeah.
Yeah. No, let's make it happen. I'm having the time of my life just listening to you guys talk. And I have to admit that I'm not and have not been a super sports person, but listening to you and vibing on the energy that you bring to it excites me. So thank you so much, Coach Leah, for what you're doing. And Leah, thank you for the leadership and the communications power you bring to understanding, inviting people into the game. So thank you both so very much.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
Thank you so much, Leah. Before I go, I want to just, I have the standings of the 2024 playoffs for the NBA. And Leah, I just wanted to ask you really quick, are you surprised by any of these results right now? Because we've got Boston leading 1-0 over the Heat in their series. Cleveland is 2-0 over the Magic in their series. Milwaukee 1-0 over the Pacers. The Knicks 2-0. They had an amazing final second shot win last night against the Sixers. We've got OKC, our own Chet Holmgren, leading that squad, and they're up 1-0. We've got the Clippers up 1-0 against the Mavs, and then we've got, of course, our Minnesota 1-0 over the Suns, and then Denver is 2-0 over the, of course, beloved Lakers. The team that went to the California Sun.
Yeah, that Denver game was pretty exciting as well, and I think everyone was shocked that they came back from 20 down, and it was able to take that one with a big Jamal Murray shot. But I think right now, I think all of these series, like one thing about, especially in the Western Conference, it's even. Like everyone, there's a lot of parity in the league right now, and so I just think we got to get a little bit deeper into these series to see who's really going to pull it off. It's hard to win in the playoffs. Everyone keeps readjusting. The coaches do their job. You make the adjustments. You come back out. The crowds are there. It's why it's, the best time of the year. And so I think we have a lot of great basketball still to be played. And then we can kind of check in on those standings and see if there's anything real remarkable happening. But I'm hoping for the Wolves that, they're in right to the end.
Indeed, indeed. Now, listen, I know you've got to jump off to get in an NBA call, but I will definitely be in touch. And Leah, again, thank you so much for carving out some time to be with us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. Appreciate the work that you all do.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you. Bye.
And Coach, thank you. We'll see you next. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I really, really enjoy learning more about sports than I ever would have, save for my chance to interact with and edit some of the work that Coach Leah is doing. So, Coach Leah, thank you so very much. Let us pivot now to something that I hope to keep as a regular feature between now and November and beyond. We've got critical elections coming up, critical national elections, but all politics, as they say, is local. Fortunate to have Minnesota's Secretary of State, Steve Simon, here with us today to talk about voting here in Minnesota. Steve, you've been here several times. Thank you for the leadership you provide to the state and for being with us here at KFAI from time to time to encourage people to both understand, value, treasure, utilize their franchise to vote. You've been Secretary of State, I think, since 2015, I believe, and defending the right to vote has been one of the hallmark assignments that you've articulated. First of all, welcome. How you doing, Steve?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. As always, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Let's jump right into it. And I have three questions. You can just flow as you will. Who can vote in Minnesota? The question comes up because there's information on whether or not people that had felony offenses or who've served time can vote now. So I'll clarify that.
Right.
And then how do people vote in Minnesota? What are the methods for voting? Is it the same everywhere? And finally, when is voting in Minnesota? Because I think there's sometimes confusion about early voting, mail-in, et cetera. So let's go over those three.
Sure. Great questions. And thanks, Al, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it because let me just say, we are in it right now, right? This is the earliest time in decades for the presidential level that the field has been set. And so we're in the election season right now. This isn't something for later on. We're in it. We're feeling it. We can detect it every day. But to your question about who can vote. So it's really simple in Minnesota. You've got to be 18 years old. You've got to be a citizen of the United States. You've got to be a resident of the state of Minnesota. And you can't currently be incarcerated. However, and I think this is where you're going, Al, we changed the law last year. Some of us have worked a long time on this. We changed the law last year. There used to be a different law. Now the law is quite clear when it comes to incarceration. If you're incarcerated, you cannot vote. However, the moment that a person is no longer incarcerated, they have the freedom to vote. That's the change. The old rule was, no, it could be years, sometimes decades before a person who's not incarcerated could vote. Get that out of your head now. The new rule is really simple. If you're incarcerated, nope, you can't vote. But the second you step out, doesn't matter whether you still have time on a sentence. That's all irrelevant now. If you've done your time, that's it. You have the freedom to vote back. That's key. That's 55,000 Minnesotans, by the way, who last year, with the stroke of a pen, basically, got their freedom to vote back. So I and my office have been working very hard with many partners throughout the state to get to those 55,000 people, simply to make them aware of that right to vote, which has been restored.
Steve, I had suggested on radio one time that one thing we ought to be, if we're really progressive, is thinking about making a requirement for leaving incarceration that you vote. So maybe registering to vote ought to be one of the criteria that determines whether a person is able to leave, among other criteria. I said it kind of facetiously, but it really emphasizes a point on encouraging civic engagement as part of the process of rehabilitating and accepting both accountability and responsibility, even in arenas where you think you don't belong.
That's a really interesting point, Al. And I would say right now, there's no requirement of the kind that you're suggesting. However, the Department of Corrections, I think, has done a really good job of trying to educate. It's in all the materials. We're working with both the state and federal probation systems too, to make sure that probation officers, state and federal, are letting folks know about this. And I've been invited to 2 separate correctional facilities. I went to Stillwater and I went to St. Cloud to speak with those who are within, I think it's about 30 to 40 days of release. There's a special class that many of them have in that 30 to 45 day mark. And I've been invited to come speak to that class. Again, one in St. Cloud and one in Stillwater. And I'm doing 2 to 4 more over the next few weeks and months, going to talk to folks and letting them know about this newfound freedom that they're going to have when they leave. So not quite the level that you're suggesting, but still the Department of Corrections, from where I sit, has been doing a pretty good job, a very good job, I should say, of really encouraging folks and letting them know what's what.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm talking with Steve Simon, Minnesota Secretary of State. We're talking about voting. So how do people vote in Minnesota? Is it at the ballot box? Is it by mail? What other ways are there?
It's all of the above. There are 3 main ways to vote in Minnesota. One is the traditional way, which is to go to a polling place on election day. And our website, if I might say so, is a really good one-stop shop and resource. That website is MN Votes, MN like Minnesota, mnvotes.gov, mnvotes.gov. And one of the things you can do, that you can register to vote on that site. You can also find out where your polling place is on that site and go to it. And remember, we have a rule in Minnesota we have had for 50 plus years, long time, where it's okay if you're not registered to vote. You can show up on game day at your polling place and you can register right there. There's no cutoff. You know, most states in this country to this day, most of America, there's a cutoff of usually about a month, where if you're not registered to vote a month before the election, that's it. You're done. You're out. There's no backdoor. There's no exception. For 50 years, we've said in Minnesota, you know what? That's not who we want to be. That's not what we want to be. So don't worry if you're not registered, or maybe you were years ago, or you had a name change, or you moved, or whatever. Forget about that. I mean, it's always a good thing to register if you can beforehand, but you don't have to. You can go to that polling place, look on our website to find out where that is. You just put in your address and boom, up will come that polling place. So that's one way to vote, Al, which is the traditional way, in person on game day, on election day itself. But in Minnesota, we have a generous, what's called absentee voting period. That's just a fancy title for voting, but before election day. And ours is 46 days. We're tied for with South Dakota, actually, for the #1 longest absentee period. So for 46 days from the election, you can start voting. And just to give you an example for this year, so the general election this year is November 5th, always on a Tuesday, November 5th. But you can start voting on September 20th. That's the beginning of the so-called absentee period. Now, to your question, Al, there are 2 ways to vote absentee. One is in person. You go to a place. It's not your polling place necessarily, but it's typically like a city hall or a courthouse or that kind of thing. And again, if you don't know where that is, go to our website, look up your absentee polling place. You just type in your address. That's it. Very simple. And you go someplace. You physically go someplace. So that's one way. The other way to vote absentee is to do it by mail. You go to that same website, mnvotes.gov, and you can order the ballot to come to you. You can vote from your couch. You can vote from your kitchen table. You can do it on your own time. During that 46-day absentee period, just go to that website, order the ballot, it comes to you. And the rule there, Al, is you've got to get the ballot back by election day, not postmarked, It's got to get there. You can hand deliver it. Under some circumstances, you can have someone else hand deliver it, or you can pop it in the mail and you can track it just like you can an Amazon or UPS package. You don't have to wonder if you put it in the mail. Wow, I hope it got there. Hope my vote is counted. Nope, you can track it and see exactly what day it arrived, when it was acknowledged, all the rest. So those are the three ways: in person on election day, in person before election day, and by mail. Those are the three.
Let me have you close with this, Steve. Give an idea, if you would, from your point of view, what the stakes are for Americans with this election. I think it's going to be, critical in all kinds of ways. But what are your thoughts from an insider's point of view?
Absolutely. There's an unmistakable, huge stakes. I mean, we are electing the most powerful person probably on planet Earth. So there's going to be intensity. There's going to be strong feelings. There's going to be a lot of emotion, and that's okay because the stakes are high. I think emotion is okay to express emotion in support of a candidate, emotion in opposition to a candidate. We want to just make sure that it's orderly, right? We don't want what we saw in 2020 with an aftermath that was ugly and violent. I'm talking about January 6th and the run up to all that. We don't want that. So what I've been saying is my big wish, if I could wave a magic wand sitting here in April for the next 6-7 months, my wish is I want high turnout and I want low drama. That's what I want: high turnout and low drama. I think we can get there in Minnesota. I'm cautiously optimistic. We're usually number one in the country in voter turnout. I want to get us back there again to number one in the country in voter turnout. The low drama part, that's up to all of us. We got to make sure we can manage our disagreements and manage our passion and manage our intensity. We just don't want anything to go off the rails. We want an orderly election, and I think we can get there.
Well, let me ask you to play out your doomsday scenario or your worst possibility. What could go wrong? And I ask that question because I'm fearful, number one, that those that I view as the MAGA right, I think have an intention that is dangerous from my point of view to Black people, progressive people, people of color, and therefore to the nation. I think they believe that they have so much to lose that they are prepared to, and there's talk about, revolution or armed resistance. That scares me. What is the worst scenario and how do we avoid it?
The worst case scenario, there are many, but let me just talk about one from where I sit in terms of the work that I do. And there are a lot of worst case scenarios, but one is that we have somewhat of a repeat of 2020 where people refuse to acknowledge the results of the election, where they say that the election is rigged and fixed and stolen when it was none of those things, when it was fair and accurate and honest and secure. That is the thing that I would say most of my colleagues around the country feel the most strongly about, that we don't want that. No matter what the result is and what the outcome, we can't have a repeat of what happened in 2020, regardless of who's doing it. We have to make sure that you can always play things out in court. That's every American's right, of course. Go to court if you don't like the result or you think you have proof of something that went wrong, of course. I'm not saying that. But when that process is done, when one or several, or as in the case of 2020, dozens of courts, literally dozens across this country, heard testimony and took evidence and all the rest and have concluded that no, we're going forward and the certified winner is the winner. When that's done, that's when it's got to stop. And from my standpoint in the democracy business, that is a worry, because we saw what could happen in 2020 when people sort of stirred up trouble and pitted Americans against one another based on, frankly, just disinformation about elections. So that's one of. There are several, Al, as you point out, and other people might have different takes on it. But from where I sit, doing the work that I do, that's the thing that potentially troubles me the most.
Steve Simon, thank you so much. We'll have you back on. We want to keep the fires lit under all of us to make sure that we do what we're supposed to do and undertake our civic responsibility, our duty to each other and to our democracy. Thank you, Stephen.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Al.
All right, take care. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We've got much more today as well. 2 more segments on the program. We're going to go into a follow-up interview with involved with the Upper Harbor project, and then I'm going to finish the program with my colleagues Yusef Mjini and Antonio Rosell. I'm not sure if Yoji is going to be here or not. We're going to have the last conversation, sort of update on the war between Israel and Hamas, or the conflict in Gaza between Israel and the Palestinians. But first, let me bring on James Trice. James Trice is the CEO of an organization called the Public Policy Project. It's an independent provider of public policy consulting and leadership training, civic engagement training, community engagement, environmental and social justice, strategic planning, and advocacy services. Issues impacting Black, Brown, Indigenous communities and low-income people. And one of the projects they've worked on, and we've had the pleasure of engaging them around, is called the Minneapolis Upper Harbor Project. James, how you doing, man?
For having me. Appreciate it.
Well, good. And you're going to stick around, too, for the conversation on Gaza as a public policy concern. But let me ask you to invite our other colleagues. Hillary Holmes is here. I don't know if Brother Bill English is with us or not, but who else do we have on this discussion?
I thought Bill was joining us. I know Hillary is on, and I'm not for sure if Eric from CPAD is on that, but Hillary Holmes is on, and she is the project manager for the Upper Harbor Terminal for CPAD.
Well, let me do two things. One, Hillary, welcome you to the program again. Good to see you again. Thank you for being here. And as always, my intention is to explain to people the value proposition. This is a major, major undertaking for the city of Minneapolis in general, for North Minneapolis in particular. And what's so exciting about it is that from the beginning, it was described as an equity-led or a project that is developed with the lens and through the lens of equity. That's significant. So if you would give us an update, and James, I want you to, in the course of this conversation, keep inviting people to show up to the next public hearing on the project, which I think is May 2nd, I believe.
Yep, May 2nd. Yep, at the Urban Research and Outreach Engagement Center, or UROC, 2001 Plymouth Avenue in North Minneapolis, May 2nd from 5:30 to 7:30. So we are inviting individuals to come and really make your voice heard, give your opinion, hear updates about the project, and participate in the conversation about what you actually want to see happen there, because it will impact North Minneapolis residents in particular, but Minneapolis as a whole. So major, major, major development, probably the biggest development in North Minneapolis, probably since the Heritage Park development. So we want people to be involved and make their voice heard and come hear what's happening.
Hillary, set the table for us, describe the project, sort of where it came from, where it is now, and what we want to deliver to the citizens of Minneapolis.
Yes, of course. Hi, Al. Thanks again for having us on. This is good timing. You know, the city of Minneapolis just hosted a national conference for the American Planning Association in the last week or so. And so there were a number of people from across the country visiting. And so we were discussing Upper Harbor and giving some overview presentation information to, again, people from across the country. And so it goes without saying just how much community engagement and how much public engagement has played a role in this development and this redevelopment and this effort. It really goes back to the 90s. So that's before my time in any professional role anyway. And my colleague, or our department director, I should say, Eric Hansen, that's who we were referencing earlier. He's the director of the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development. And his history on the project has gone back many years, again, because he was previously a project manager at staff level with CPED earlier on in his career. So all that said, there's been a lot of visioning for the site. It's about 50 acres. It's on the Mississippi River in North Minneapolis in the McKinley neighborhood. It's a mile of riverfront, and it was operating as a barge shipping terminal for multiple decades. So when the lock closed to the barge traffic, that was around 2016, I believe, this current effort kicked off. So it has been, almost a decade, going on a decade for this most recent. And so we went through a long planning process, a long visioning process, and that's where James became involved. We had the fortune, I would say, of getting to work alongside James and Devon Nolan as part of the learning tables. And through that came the coordinated plan for redevelopment. We had a very committed, very invested advisory committee, and that was called the Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative Planning Committee. And that's where Mr. English participated. That's where I got to meet Bill first. And so that's how he was involved and how I know him from the project. So through that, the city council approved that plan in the fall of 2021. And since that time, we've been doing a lot of work on site to get the site ready. And so we can talk more about that. We have plenty to share at the community meeting. It's a meeting and not a hearing. I just wanted to correct that because there's an opportunity to participate and for discussion and to just, talk to project staff and the development team. But it will be a more open conversation. And then, just again, wanted to note that's May 2nd. And there's a lot, of exciting updates that we have to share just from how the site has been changing over the last couple of years to get ready.
We had one of the representatives of the developer on last time. We don't have anybody today, but there's been some change or turnover at the developer. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Yes, of course I can. Yeah, the master developer is United Properties. And we were on with you last month, Al. Brandon Champeau from United Properties had joined us. I met Brandon also working on this development. So I'm just about 6 years at the city of Minneapolis working on the Upper Harbor development and started working with Brandon at that time. And you're right, Brandon has moved on to another position with another company as these things, change and evolve. People as well. And so there has been a change, at least in his role and what company he's with. So his colleague, Tom Strom, he will be at the meeting May 2nd. And Tom and I work very closely together on the day-to-day project management. So United Properties is still a committed partner to the development, is still our master developer, and will also be there to discuss their project updates on May 2nd.
And I raised the question because I think it would be fair for me to say that people that developed a relationship with Brandon Champeau, and they were comfortable with him because you're operating in an arena where there's a lot of skepticism all the time, where people feel like they show up, they voice their opinions, and then they get railroaded or their voices are ignored, and that's kind of common. And my sense is that Brandon's consistency of being present and listening in a way that he's articulated the number of hours he's invested in engagement, that's been something that's kind of got past the skepticism that existed. Let me bring one more person in here who's going to be on the next panel, but he's an urban planner, Antonio Rosell. And Antonio may have some comments or questions or feelings or feedback on it. But James, go ahead. And, I think I raised the question with you. Do you sense that there is any hesitation on the part of the community? Where does the community feel and sit right now as you see it?
Yeah, Al, thank you so much for that question. And it's a great question because, and I think you alluded to it, there is this history of divestment in Black and Brown and Indigenous communities historically in the United States, period. Communities of color, Indigenous communities are told one thing, particularly with regard to a development within their communities that impact them, and then something else totally different happens. And so that, the skepticism is real. It's steeped in a history-long divestment in Black and Brown Indigenous communities, and the skepticism is not personal. So it's not about a particular developer in and of itself, but about the development process and how it impacts communities. And communities, want to know that they can trust a developer when he or she it says that they're going to commit to really making sure our voices are heard and that our views are incorporated within a particular project like this. And over the years, my engagement with this has been 2016, actually, when I started the learning tables and did a series of meetings every month, 4 or 5 hours each, and to get community together with the development team as well as the city of Minneapolis, really to talk through all the fine details of what's going to happen with that. And we built trust with those individuals who've shown up and been there and probably received some of the blunt of our frustration. And again, not personal, but it was out of our frustration about what historically has happened. And so that trust was been built. And so then when we see a change, then people pause and say, okay, are we still on track? Is this still going to happen? Is it real? it's not it's not something that to be taken lightly. But I think our community has come a long way. They've trusted United Properties. They've seen United Properties done. Brandon was the face of that, but I think Tom can come in and really and really continue where Brandon has left off, and continue to build that trust in community. So I think that's what's up.
Antonio, any questions, comments? I know that you are generally about the neighborhood and about urban planning and urban development. Any thoughts or impressions or feelings or questions? Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thanks for the invitation to participate today. I would say that just as Hilary mentioned and as James has mentioned as well, this is an amazing opportunity for the Minneapolis community to really rethink what happens in an amazingly large portion of riverfront. And it's something that, because it's a change of use from what was, really from the start of Minneapolis, a shipment, an industrial site, a transshipment area that no longer is in use, that this opportunity surfaces now provides us with a way to really leverage all the great assets that have been built up in the city of Minneapolis, all of the political access that we have developed as communities over time, all of the wisdom that has been acquired over the last 40, 50 years about, what might actually work in order to redevelop a place, and in what we have learned in the last 10 or 15 years about how do we bring community more effectively, how do we develop local economic opportunity, how do we develop sustainable transportation options, how do we build wealth and prosperity that actually reaches out and touches all of us and that all of us can benefit from. So I think it's a fantastic project, a fantastic opportunity. And, I haven't been involved with the project very much at all. But I would say that it sounds like you have a wonderful team in place. And I think that's just wonderful. It fills me with optimism.
Hilary, take a second and tell us again what's planned for the site. You might have mentioned it broadly, but a little more detail on what we can expect when it's all said and done, and when will that be?
Of course. So I made some mention to us being busy on site, getting the site ready. And so I'd like to take a moment also to underscore the city's commitment to this vision for redevelopment and what we've invested to date and continue to, and what a priority this is for the city of Minneapolis to deliver on everything that we have in the coordinated plan. Most importantly, all the benefits from the development. So what we have is the city has been doing some demolition and kind of site preparation. So getting the site ready, installing public utilities that can service the park and the development. So there will be a new regional park on site. So that's a riverfront park with bike and walking trails, the multi-use trails right along the river. There's a large park planned for the center, kind of right at Dowling, where Dowling and Washington, where Dowling comes into the site. And there's also a new parkway. So, the west and east sides of the river have the River Parkway and the Grand Rounds bike trails. So there's a new segment of parkway that the city constructed on site. And all of that is to prepare now for the park development. So the park construction project begins this spring. The new park is set to open in 2025. So we're really looking forward to that. The development that's coming online, there's a few developments that are in the first phase. And that first private development is called what we call Parcel 6A, which doesn't mean much to others probably, but right at the corner of Dowling and Washington, United Properties is working with Building Blocks, which is a nonprofit affordable housing developer. That's Devin George is involved with Building Blocks. And so that is for a multi-use, mixed use, I should say, residential commercial development right at Dowling and Washington to really anchor that intersection and activate that intersection. So that's right at Dowling and Washington. There have been improvements on Dowling Avenue to connect the McKinley neighborhood across 94 because of what a barrier we all know 94 to be. There are, again, improvements to both the sidewalk and then bike access as well, and then the public realm. So just to make that experience of being, on the street more pleasant. And so to strengthen those connections and get people safely and comfortably down to the site. And so those are some things happening just within the last couple of years and the next year. And then, of course, the Outdoor Music Amphitheater, also known as the Community Performing Arts Center, they are planning on a 2025 open. And so they're also kind of deep in, they've gone through design and also deep into getting construction documents together, financing of those kinds of things. So we continue to work closely with that team, and that's, a partnership between First Avenue Productions and the Minnesota Orchestra. And so that may have been the most recent news you saw about that project, that partnership that had formed. So that's a very important partnership. And
Any other manufacturing or light industrial things planned so far?
So that's something up for discussion. There's a proposal for the Community Health and Wellness Hub. And so we're going to be discussing that at the May 2nd meeting. And the United Properties team is going to introduce that development partner, or the kind of, anchor partner for that development. And then also, yes, looking about how to bring jobs to the site that had been envisioned. And I would say, to give credit to Mr. English, his involvement to really push for that to be an earlier phase of development rather than later. And so that is still in the works, and there will be more updates on the rest of the private development at the May 2nd meeting. So we can discuss more on that.
Well, James, please make the invitation again.
Yes. Before I make the invitation, I just want to emphasize this. There was an intention on behalf of the Collaborative Planning Committee to make sure that it's intentional that Black and Brown communities benefit from this project. I know Mr. Rosell talked about all of us benefiting from this, but many times when we say all of us, Black folks miss out. We need to be intentional about making sure that Black and Brown communities benefit from this. And North Minneapolis is home to the largest, I think, African-American population in the city of Minneapolis. And so we need to make sure that whenever financial benefits, whatever wealth benefits occur, that it's intentional that Black and Brown communities benefit from this. Because if we don't say intentional, the default is to continue the history-long divestment in Black and Brown communities. So I invite everyone to come out May 2nd, 5:30 to 7:30, Urban Research and Outreach Center, 2001 Plymouth Avenue, UROC, and make your voice heard. Hear what the development team is talking about. The city is really, really committed to this and making sure that our voices are heard on this, and they've been very instrumental in making sure that communities hear what's happening and that communities get the information and make sure their voices are heard. So thank you all so much. And I look forward to seeing you on May 2nd.
There we go. Well, thank you. Hilary, thank you so much. And James, you and Antonio, stick around for a second. We're going to switch to the last topic for the day. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. As promised, a robust conversation. We've delivered that so far. We'll continue for the balance of the program. Joining me and James and Antonio is my colleague and friend, Ndugu Yusef Mjini. We want to spend the balance of the hour sort of looking back at what's going on between at Israel and Iran. The Israelis attacked Iran. One of the topics we've looked at. Tehran, however, is playing down the Israeli attacks and seems to be signaling that it will not retaliate. But what do we need to know about the strike on Iran? What could happen next? Yusef, let me start with you. Why don't you go in and sort of contextualize the conversation, and we'll ask the other of our team to join in.
Sure. Thank you, Al. Good afternoon, James and Antonio. There are 5 things that are important to know, and I'll try and cover them quickly. Number 1, what we've witnessed in terms of the drone attack from Iran into Israel and the reverse drone attack into Iran basically amounts to saber rattling. Okay, and this was preceded by the Israeli bombing of the Iranian consulate on sovereign territory, which is still being discussed as a violation of international law. Okay, Iran is a nation of almost 90 million people, and they have 11 million soldiers in their army. So we're not talking about a fight at the local sandlot should one break out. And there are some parties who would like to see and are encouraging a full-scale, all-out Middle East war, which would cost countless thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives, okay? Yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken issued a report that that points out human rights violations by Israel, by the Israeli Defense Forces, and by Hamas, and went so far as to say for the first time that aid will be conditional to certain parts of the Israeli military, particularly an Orthodox right-wing Jewish special group of soldiers, because of the repeated human rights violations. So the United States is now at least putting conditional aid for military support on the table. Meanwhile, in Gaza, every 10 minutes, a child is killed or wounded, and 34,000 people plus have been killed to date in Gaza, the majority of whom are women and children, because the majority of people in Gaza are women and children. And as of a month ago, 9,000 males had died in the conflict in Gaza, and Israel is claiming each and every male body that is killed is automatically assumed to be a member of Hamas, which they have yet to substantiate or document. Okay, let's bring it back home, okay, where protests have broken out at Ivy League colleges, at Yale, at Harvard, at Columbia University, at second-tier colleges, Michigan, the University of Minnesota, across the country. Tent camps are being established on campus grounds. People are calling for a ceasefire. They're calling for the release of the hostages, and they're calling for accountability for the actions of the Israeli Defense Force in Gaza and in the West Bank. And these protests are very similar to the anti-war protests that we saw that sprouted up around the country. And they are literally popping up like dandelions. The problem with a protest is that when you put an announcement on social media, you can't control who shows up or what kind of posters or banners they're going to bring or what kind of issues they're going to voice publicly for the media. These are not anti-Semitic protests. These are peaceful protests calling for a ceasefire, the end to unnecessary death of women and children and men in Gaza and in the West Bank. So there's a great deal happening with the protest, with Iran and Israel doing the saber rattling. At present, both are claiming that there will be no further retaliation, although Israel has stated publicly that they intend to assassinate the leadership of Hamas, regardless of which country they are in or what the relationship is between that country and Israel. And of course, we know the man in the middle, as Michael Jackson would say, is Netanyahu, okay, who avoids going to court by prolonging the conflict and staying in office, and the leveling of the buildings, the culture, the historical icons, the third oldest Christian church on the planet, the leveling of blocks and blocks of property in Gaza and in the West Bank means it then becomes very easy to establish additional Israeli settlements in those communities and extend the wall that currently exists between Gaza, the West Bank, and what used to be Palestine. So it's a very complicated situation. There's a lot going on, but the major issue is the continuing conflict, the unnecessary collateral deaths, the damage and destruction. And one health agency has indicated that half of the population of Gaza will starve by July 1st because humanitarian aid organizations have pulled out after the killing of the World Central Kitchen, the murder of the World Central Kitchen caravan that has delivered more than 1.35 million meals in Gaza alone. So humanitarian aid at a partial standstill, the death of women and children, and 34,000 killed, 70,000 injured. That's what's on people's minds. We regret and we bitterly refuse to add anything other than dismay at the October 7th Hamas raid into what used to be Palestine, where 1,200 civilians, including 300 Israeli Defense Force members, were killed, but 70,000 injured and 34,000 killed in Gaza is really what's responsible for this outcry of people calling for a ceasefire, the return of the hostages, and accountability for the Israeli Defense Force actions. So I will shut up at that point.
Jump in, Antonio Rosell.
Thank you, and thank you for that overview, Dugu. Thank you very much.
Introduce yourself and your work, because you've been doing work in this area for a long time in peace building.
So I've been involved with different organizations and groups working in solidarity campaigns and peace efforts for a long time. One of the organizations that I encourage all of our listeners to look up is Pastors for Peace, and that's a group that I started working with probably about 20 years ago, maybe a little longer. Reverend Lucius Walker was the founder, and a very thoughtful and proactive person working for solidarity and for peace. I just want to add a couple of things, if I could. And
please.
So one of the, the starvation, the blocking of food into Gaza that has been ongoing now for more than 6 months. It used to be that about 500 trucks a day of foodstuffs would be needed to sustain the population there, because they are actually blockaded from trade and movement in and out of Gaza, where 2.3 million people live. That flow has been interrupted now for more than 6 months. And some organizations like World Food Kitchen, we're providing a portion, a small fraction of what is necessary for survival. Right now, I want to bring our listeners' attention to the fact that there are 2 Minnesotans that are now part of an international flotilla that is attempting to deliver 5,000 tons of food going through ships that sailed from Turkey to make a landing and deliver food. As it's a people's campaign. So freedomflotilla.org all together. You can. I invite all of us to look them up. About 10 years ago, when they attempted to do the same thing, not in the context of this current crisis, but Gaza has been encircled and tied down for more, since 2006. So it's going on quite a long time. About 10 years ago, when this same organization tried to do the same thing, 10 participants were killed by the Israeli Navy as they were intercepted before landing in Gaza. And so right now there's a group with 2 Minnesotans and about, I think, 150 some people from the United States and from many other countries in the world who are attempting to bring humanitarian aid, basically food and medicine, into Gaza. freedomflotilla.org. That's one thing I wanted to share. The other is a really important point about our responsibility for the current tragedy. Today, the U.S. Senate is voting on an approval of $26 billion of financial and military aid to Israel today. And that's after, and both of our senators, Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith, they initially approved that about a month and a half ago. It was approved by the House now, this last Saturday. All of our Minnesota delegation, with the exception of Ilhan Omar, she is the only person from Minnesota who voted against this $26 billion aid. All of our Minnesota delegation voted for that, and today the Senate will now, the new package that was forwarded to them, they are voting on it today. It was supposed to happen, the debates to start at 1 p.m. Today. So we'll see. It is expected that both Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith will vote to approve this $26 billion. So we have a responsibility financially and also in the actions that our government has providing diplomatic cover at the United Nations. Just last week, the United States was the only country in the Security Council to vote against recognition of Palestine as a state. And that's something that, our diplomats, the State Department, President Biden, they talk about a two-state solution, but here we are saying, but we're not going to recognize the existence of one of the two states that are required for a two-state solution. And that's after we have 3 times at the United Nations Security Council voted to veto a ceasefire resolution. And now when we finally did vote for it, we're saying, oh, it's not binding. So there is a lot, that we as citizens of the United States have responsibility for. And I think that there's a lot that we can do exercising our right to vote, our right to be active, our right to be thoughtful and informed. And it's so good that you had Secretary Simon earlier today, because all of us as voters and as people who are represented by our government can have a role to play towards peace, towards a ceasefire.
Trice, let me have you jump in, James. Public policy. What are the issues we should be looking at as citizens in public policy? And Antonio mentioned the $26 billion investment in the bill that the Senate's considering, but it also includes, I think, a $61 billion investment of aid for Ukraine. And how do we negotiate either an affinity for one and not the other, or belief in one and not the other? Or is there some common thread that ought to provide a perspective that lets us be on the right side, period? What do you think, James Trice?
Well, thank you for the question, Al. Let me just say this before answering that question. My wife and I were actually in Israel, took a trip to Israel in July, this past July, and went over into Palestine. And we went over into Palestine. We were greeted with love and respect by the people there, with open arms, saying to us, "Welcome, brothers and sisters." So they identified with the struggle that Black people struggled with in America for years, and so they identified with the struggle and they welcomed us. And so then when the hit happened, when it was August, September, it really it really hit me, because I was like, I was just there. I was just there in the area where that had been hit. My wife and I were in Tel Aviv, which we enjoyed, but being over in Palestine was just really fascinating to us, and get a chance to meeting the people and talking with the people was really amazing. But I think, first of all, recognizing Palestine as a state, having that two-state solution, I think is the key, is one of the keys. But I also think that we cannot underestimate the political implications of the fact that Netanyahu was under indictment. He was was in trouble with some violations, and we have to not underestimate the fact that a lot of this is for him to continue to remain in power. And you know how it is when a war happens.
Sounds like Donald Trump to me.
Yes, when war happens, and a political leader is really under some kind of scrutiny, many times nations don't change leaders in that process. That leader remains in power, and so I'm concerned that the fact that Netanyahu is so willing to just to kill whoever and to continue this war and to wipe people out, that this is not him wanting to remain in power and get the heat off himself. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned about the humanitarian crisis of the millions of people that have been murdered, as Yusef Mjini so eloquently stated, that we have to recognize this, and I think it's incumbent of us, on all Americans, to really stand up and speak against this humanitarian crisis. The hit on
we have about less than 40 seconds. I want to give Yusef and Antonio a 20-second window each. Comment, final thought, advice, direction. Unmute, Yusef.
this has been a very informative conversation. I want to thank Antonio and James for contributing to it. And thank you, Al, for always being open to having a fair and accurate conversation about important issues.
20 seconds, Antonio.
I second that. Thank you very much for the invitation and invite everyone to follow freedomflotilla.org. They need our help and support. 2 fellow Minnesotans are on that boat trying to do the right thing. Thank you.
James, thank you. And thank you for listening. Support KFAI, support the conversation, and we'll see you next time. Take care. I'm Al McFarlane.